Today's video I'm going to go through diagnosing a motor that's not starting up. So the last video I did was if it wasn't cranking, so more of an electrical problem if it has a starter motor in it. Well, this is more about whether it's a electric start or a pull start. In this case I'm using a pull start as an example. It's turning over, but it's just not starting up. There's a lot of what we do today could also apply to a motor that's running, but just not running very well. So there's three things you always have to think about for a motor to run. So essentially for it to run, you need money, luck, and a can of start blasted. No, hang on, it's not it. No, it's fuel, compression, and spark. That's it. So we'll go through this. It's a bit arbitrary the order you do these things in, but it's good to think of those three main things. Have I got spark? Have I got fuel coming through? And do I have good compression? In compression, think air. Ultimately it's what you need to have a fire. There's also finer points to these things too. What's the quantity of fuel? What's the quality of the fuel? Does it have water in it, etc., etc. How strong is the spark? What time is the spark firing? What is the sort of acceptable level of compression, etc. So all these sorts of things come into it, but what it helps you do is divide your sort of the process of diagnosis into those three components. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on any one of those things. I'm hoping that for each one of those things down the track, if I haven't already, I'll be doing a video in the future that that sort of goes into that aspect in detail. But this is more about just how would you approach diagnosing it from scratch. So sorry, enough talking, let's start having a look at a few things that I'd start. So first thing I'd always check is the simple things. Don't sort of jump into mechanic mode. Think a little bit more like an operator, I guess, first. Have I put the lanyard in, the man overboard switch? Otherwise you're not going to get an ignition, get turned over, see you blue in the face, and it'll never happen. So is that lanyard in? Have I run out of fuel? These kind of basic things. So once you check the lanyards in and your ignition's on, next thing to check is fuel. Now I'm starting here with a brand new fuel line that I've just put together. So I'm just going to get the air out of this first, but then the next thing I'm going to do is just put a bit into a jar and just have a look at the quality of the fuel, see if it's got any water in it, which is pretty common if the boat lives outside. It's either got rain in it from some way or it's just condensation and moisture. So I'll just quickly prime this and then we'll have a look at the fuel that's in this tank. So while we're on the subject of fuel, I've taken this fitting off the end just to pump some through because it's easier and it didn't have a hose clamp on it yet. But one thing I had then is I was pumping a lot and nothing was coming through because at the other end, this ball bearing, spring-loaded ball bearing, wasn't pushing the pinning on the tank. And that can happen at either end. Sometimes that pin that sits inside this fitting, hang on, I'll zoom in a little bit and show you. Sometimes this pin here, rather than pushing the ball bearing open, can actually sort of slide down the side of it. So you have a situation where you think fuel's going in, it's all connected, but the valve's not actually open. So I'll pump some to this jar. I'll also show you, if you can't get this fitting off, all you really need to do is just push this ball bearing in with a screwdriver or something, not too far, just enough to open it up, and then squeeze the bulb, and you can just squeeze fuel out again. So I'm just going to hook this up. Now this has been primed. Now this fuel, over you see, is pretty clean. Got a little bit of residue that actually goes through the jar, wasn't that clean to start with. But you can't see that layer. What I will do though, is just put a bit of water into it and show you what it looks like. So once you've got water and fuel, you'll see how that they separate instantly into two layers. They just don't mix at all. The water is always going to be in the bottom, but you're drawing fuel from the bottom of the tank, obviously. So if ever you see this layer, you know you've got water in your fuel. So the rest of the tank obviously doesn't have water in it, because I just added that little bit. So now I'm just going to keep squeezing this bulb, now that I know this line's primed, and just to make sure that I'm getting fuel all the way to fill the carburetor bulb. Now I can see it flowing through the fuel filter. Generally the first thing you come to after the fuel enters the outboard is the fuel filter. So I'm going to take that off and I'll show you. We'll have a look, because a clogged fuel filter is obviously, once again, just a part of this fuel problem. Trying to trace where you're getting fuel right from the tank all the way through into the bulb of carburetor and through the jets into the motor, into the crankcase in this case with a two-stroke. So I'm just going to keep screwing this bulb till you feel it gets a reasonable amount of pressure. Alright, now I could hear it. I don't know if you could hear on the video or not. We go over the cicadas or crickets. I could hear it filling the bulb, and then the bulb, the primer bulb's gone quite firm. So this outboard seems like it didn't have any fuel in the bulb at all. Could be that simple, you know. So we just start with fuel. We might have started with spark, or the personally I think fuel's always probably where I'd naturally start. So probably could have checked the fuel filter before I primed it. But another part of me also goes, look, just get some fuel through, see if it starts. I always sort of be a firm believer in sort of escalating your efforts as they warrant it. You know, if a motor's just lost prime, it's running out of fuel, you don't need to pull it to pieces. You know, try those simple things first. But having said that, you know, now the fuel filter's full of fuel, maybe I could have cleaned it first. But anyway, let's just sort of proceed with the simple things. So we know we've got fuel. At this stage, I'd probably even try and start it. You know, there clearly wasn't any fuel in that carburetor bowl. I could hear it filling as I was squeezing the bulb. So it might be that simple. So it's good to have a test, go, is that the problem? Problem solved, move on, nice and easy. If not, we'll go on to other things, but let's just try it. So, where were we? Sorry, I just got distracted then, and it's now a couple of days later. I'm trying to remember what we got up to. So I think the point was then that put new fuel on, pump the fuel, and I could hear it from the carburetor. And if I pull start, it'll just start now. So we'll keep pushing on using this outboard just to sort of go through the principles, but it seems as though it was a lack of fuel. Now, I guess the first thing you've got to think now is if this stopped running and the carburetor bowl seemed to be empty, you've got to sort of suspect the fuel pump, because just because you can sort of manually fill it with the bulb with the fuel line doesn't mean it's going to run for more than a minute by the time you put it back on the boat. So what I'm going to do now is just take the fuel pump off. Now you can test these fuel pumps by putting a small amount of pressure and a small amount of vacuum into the various ins and outs on them. But I'm going to try and keep this video pretty simple. I want to get to the point where just briefly going over everything, and I will do videos down the track, and I'll add just links to those videos to this one as time goes by, so by the time you're watching this they may be there. But I'll add some detailed videos about fuel pumps, ignition timing, all the sort of finer points later. But for now we'll just keep it to the main sort of touching on the main points. So at this point I would now suspect the fuel pump. So I'm going to take that off and just see if we can have a quick look at what condition it's in. So on this model, the fuel pump's just directly on the side of the carburetor. It's got an inlet here into the bottom, and then it pumps straight into the bowl. Quite often on bigger outboards, or even actually newer models of this 15 horsepower, there'll actually be an outlet hose going into the carburetor as well. So I'm just going to undo these 4 screws, take the fuel pump off, and just have a look at the reed valves and the membrane inside there. So here's the fuel pump off the carburetor now. We've got a cover plate here, and essentially there's 2 chambers. So we've got these sort of gaskets and membranes. This isn't in great condition, but it doesn't have any tears on it. Then we've got this midsection. So this section goes on the outboard side, and it actually just takes a small tube, which is the vacuum in the crankcase. So it's taking a kind of pressure and a vacuum as it sucks fuel in and compresses it. And just that vacuum and pressure alternating pumps this diaphragm. And if we go on the other side here, we'll see in between these 2 halves is 2 sections. You can kind of think of them as like sort of, I guess, almost sort of ventricles in a heart sort of thing. So you've got these reed valves, and these little reed valves are opposite. So one allows sort of fuel to be sucked through, and the other allows it to be blown out. But what they do is stop that motion, that pumping motion, from just pushing fuel backwards and forwards. They're essentially one-way valves. So what you're really looking for is a problem with the valves, so that they're either misaligned, so there's a gap, so it's like a leaky valve, broken valve obviously, or a break in any of the gaskets, or a tear in the membrane. They're all the things that will stop it. Now, I'm not seeing any of those obvious symptoms here. I don't have a rebuild kit for this. You know, it'd be nice once you've got it off. It's not great to reuse gaskets and put things back together like this. But look, having said that, certainly done it plenty of times, I'll be honest. And if there isn't a whole lot of damage, I don't think it's, actually, to be honest with you, it's not even the money, it's just the time and the availability of these parts where we are. So I'm pretty happy with that, happy to put it back together. One thing I did notice though is none of these screws have the Loctite on it. It's good to Loctite these screws that hold the three parts of the pump together and hold it onto the outboard, because you do need to maintain a sort of tight vacuum seal, which is why one of the tests for these is actually to blow a bit of air through it. So with this one, really what you're looking at is whether it can hold vacuum. So fuel is supposed to blow through here, so that's kind of fine. It should blow through, and it actually comes out here, back into the outboard. So you've got suction here and the actual outlet on the same side. But I actually don't have any tool here with me at the moment for generating a vacuum on here, only for pressure, so I can't really test it that way. But what I'm going to do is just put a bit of Loctite on here, put it back up, and just make sure it's got a nice tight seal. A really cursory examination will give that fuel pump pretty much a clean bill of health. I don't think that is a problem here, certainly not obviously anyway. So, okay, this motor's running, but say it wasn't still. Next thing I'd be checking for is spark. Okay, so there's lots of increasingly sort of complex ways you can do that. There's scanners that let you monitor the the duration of the spark, the voltages, the sort of almost the waveform of it sort of thing. But the most common way really is to take a spark plug out, earth the casing of it, pull the motor over, and just see if you got spark. It's a really good kind of end-to-end test. If you're not getting spark, then you need to sort of examine the ignition system, see why you're not getting spark. Could just be a dodgy spark plug. It's a really good place to start if you've got a spare one lying around. Could be the secondary coil, primary coil, CDI unit, whatever it is. So I definitely will be doing a video going through that in detail, but once again, this is just the real sort of triage diagnostic technique. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull those spark plugs out, first just have a look at them. Now, I'm still not convinced with this outboard that all that was wrong with it was having lost prime. So I'm going to keep going and looking at perhaps why it is stalled on the owner. So let's go through settings. So what I'm going to do is look at the spark plugs and just have a look at the ends of them and see what colour they are, what condition they're in, which is a great sort of diagnostic technique. Next, I'm going to hook them back up and we'll see if we've got any spark out of them. So let's do that now. I've got this spark plug just sort of held onto the casing, so it needs to be earthed to the casing. So normally just when you simply thread a spark plug in, it earths to the ground, which is just the whole sort of engine block. So I'm just going to pull it over. This is going to wobble terribly, isn't it? Hang on. So now we know we're getting spark, and we know we're getting fuel. So one thing I kind of didn't mention before with the fuel is that before we were sort of listening and we had fuel going to the bowl of the carburetor, and that's good. You know, you can have fuel blockages all the way along the line, a clogged fuel filter, a fuel pump with a torn membrane or a broken reed valve or something like that. But you also need fuel coming right through the jets of the carburetor into the cylinders, into the bores. So that's a common problem you can have. You can have a blocked jet. Jets inside a carburetor are a tiny, very small aperture. Very easy to block them. Sometimes with just even a drop of water that's stuck on there, or a bit of gunk if it hasn't run for a while, a bit of varnish. So in order to test that you've actually got fuel coming right through, what I normally do is take the spark plugs out, hold my hand near the hole, not sort of pressing on them, but just near the hole where the spark plugs went, and then pull the motor over a few times. Sorry, bit of burps. And you should see a mist of fuel sort of ending up in your hand. You'll smell if it's fuel, you know, or water, which is obviously another indication of a problem. I had one the other day that held my hand and just had water, so I think it's a blown head gasket in that motor. I'll be getting that one up here soon. So that test is actually testing that fuel's coming right from the tank and into the cylinders where you need it. So once you do that, you know you've got fuel. We've just seen we've got spark. Compression's the third part of the three that we spoke about. And to do that, you just need one of these compression testers. Pretty simple, pretty cheap. Really handy little things. Amazing kind of tool for diagnosing the motor for not much money. These just screw into the exact same spot where the spark plug comes out. So you take the spark plug out, you screw this in its place, you open the throttle wide open, you turn the motor over, and you'll get a reading of how much pressure you're able to build inside that cylinder, which will tell you whether your rings are worn, etc. Generally, you're looking for at least kind of 120. Motors will run in the 90s and things like this, but if it starts getting much below that, then you've got some trouble. And if it's really low, then it just won't start. So that could be a reason as well. So they're the three main things we talked about. We've got fuel through, we've got spark coming, we've got compression. So after lots of huffing and puffing and pull starting this motor and trying to set the timing, so it started, as you saw. Actually, maybe I didn't show you. It did start. But it's now not running very well. It's quite hard to start. So I'm sort of starting to realise this is why this has come in. It wasn't a simple fuel problem. So I should have listened to my advice because eventually I did a compression test and one of the cylinders is down to 40 psi, which is rubbish. I also then took the spark plugs out, which I was saying is always a good diagnostic technique. And some of the oil looks a bit emulsified. So I'm starting to think blown head gasket for this motor. Interestingly, I've had 3 in a row now that have had blown head. Well, this isn't confirmed. I'm going to take the head off now and show you. But I've definitely had 2, and this is looking like a third suspect blown head gasket now. So it's definitely something to be aware of, particularly when motors get old. If it is a blown head gasket, I can replace it, but you've got to kind of figure out why it blew. There's no point putting another one and having it happen again. Overheating is a pretty classic reason. So if you see a motor with a blown head gasket, make sure you check the water pump on it as well. Also check the head and the block and everything for sort of being flat and true. Uneven torquing the bolts can also cause it. One of the ones I had was definitely caused by that. Just one of the bolts was not tight on the head and the gasket had blown either side of that bolt. It's pretty obvious what caused it. Okay, so I'm going to take the head off this outboard now and we'll see if that is the cause of this sort of no-run situation, or at least running very badly. So the head of this this little outboard is all just 10mm bolts. With these heads, once again, it's this thing of trying to sort of do a spiral into the center. It's a pretty standard sort of technique for taking the pressure evenly. So I'm going to take the bolts off around and then do these center ones last. So I'll start doing that. I won't bore you with watching me undo bolts, but I'll show you the head gasket when it comes out. So I don't know how well you can see in there, but let's see if we can tilt this up to the light a little bit. That's seen better days. So this is the cylinder head. We just looked inside the cylinder and you can see here, this is this emulsified oil I was talking about. This is what I was seeing on the spark plug, this sort of grey, creamy colour. And that's obviously stopping that spark plug from firing. So this is the piston that had 40 psi. This one doesn't have the water in it, but to be honest, it was only down about 100, which is pretty low too. So I think we're getting to the bottom of this particular problem, but this video is not about this outboard, it's about the sort of diagnostic techniques. So let's push on. We're kind of getting to the bottom of what this outboard has wrong with it. And so far we haven't used any particularly special tools. the real clue to this was, well, the first clue is the compression test. Once again, this is like a $25 tool or something, so pretty cheap, worth having. Should have done that test way earlier. I actually wasted too much time looking at the ignition, presuming that because it started first pull after having fuel, that was the problem, so I jumped to a conclusion. But like I was saying, we saw we had spark, we knew we had fuel. The one thing I didn't actually check was compression. So compression, one of the things I like about testing compression early is that it's not something you can tweak or tune. You've either got good compression or you don't. If you don't, you've kind of found your problem and you're up for changing a head gasket or new rings or whatever. It depends how bad it is and what's causing it. So it's kind of a good thing to check early and tick off. So there's a lesson I've reminded myself of this video. But some of the other things are a bit tunable. Now, as I've been saying a couple of times, this video is designed just to be this sort of helicopter view of all the things that could be wrong and how you tell what's wrong. So you can definitely check out the video when I did the original 4-stroke 50 horsepower Yamaha. There's a whole thing about replacing the head gasket there, checking the head for whether it's warped or not. So check that video out for details on that. There's also a video on doing a compression test, so that's all covered in other videos. One thing I haven't done a video on yet is ignition timing. Now, I spent a bit of time looking at the timing because I kind of thought, oh, it's starting, it's stalling. Let's just have a look. The trouble is I couldn't get it to run long enough to actually easily check the ignition timing on it. But timing light's one of the things that's good for that. So if you've got an outboard and it is running, it's stalling, sometimes even if it's doing that kind of sneeze and stop, which is kind of where the piston's coming up and it's firing a bit early and it doesn't have the momentum if it's cranking slowly to go over. So that's kind of a few of the shades of grey. You've got spark, but your timing's out. Maybe your battery's charged and it's turning over, but your battery's a little bit too low to give it the momentum to pass top dead centre if it's firing a little bit early. So there are a few of the finer points there that can go wrong. Now, when we talked about compression, one thing I didn't mention is obviously you might be working on a 2-stroke motor, you might be working on a 4-stroke motor. This video kind of covers both bases. If it's 4-stroke, the head won't kind of be this simple. You'll actually have, your whole camshaft arrangement on top and everything. But one thing you do have with the 2-stroke motor is that the fuel actually goes into the crankcase first. And although you don't have the compression that you need to withstand combustion, you do actually need a sealed crankcase in order for that fuel and air mixture to be pressurized. And there's a few things that can affect that. One of the main ones is the reed valves. So if you're not getting pressure in your crankcase, reed valves can be a big cause of that. If you're running it, and as it's running, you're kind of seeing a fuel mixture coming back out the mouth of the carburetor. So here we go, here's some carburetors here. So if you sort of see fuel spitting back out the mouth of the carburetor, that's a sign that the reed valves behind it are gone. We'll have a look at some in a second. Also, the outboard, this came off, did have bad reed valves on it, on the bottom 2 cylinders. And every time it would kind of stop, you just get smoke coming out. So this is a sign that things are actually travelling backwards. Reed valves are simply one-way valves. They're just little sheets of metal that when pressure comes from this side, they push against an outside aperture. When pressure comes from the other side, they open. They just flex. That's all they are. They're pretty straightforward, but they are critical to a 2-stroke running properly. So let's, I'm not going to do it with this one because it's got really awkward bolts to get to take the carburetor off. I'll find one of the other 2-stroke outboards here and I'll crack it open and I'll show you what the reed valves look like. Alright, so I've just grabbed one of these. Almost killed myself lugging it over here, but anyway. So this is pretty much the same outboard, to be honest with you, but a newer model. So a new model, the same one. It's actually got an undiagnosed problem as well, where it just doesn't really run very well at speed. Starts alright, idles alright, just never quite gets up to full power and RPMs. So let's just take this whole thing apart. This one's a little bit nicer and these bolts go all the way through, hold the airbox and the carburetor on. So just give me a few seconds to pull this apart and I'll show you the reed valves in this one. So this is with the carburetor off. We're going to go further.
But you'll see just behind here are the reed valves, and you can usually tell by even just looking with the carburetor off how bad they are. That's where they sit, just behind the carburetor, between the carburetor and the crankcase. So I'm just going to take these 3 more bolts off, and I'll pull the reed valves over so you can see them more clearly. So this is what the reed valves look like. With a V comes in, these are stoppers to stop them opening too far. The main point is, if you can look through there and you can see light, let me open one for you. So you'll see they bend out pretty easily. It's just the suction that opens that valve up. Yeah, I think you can see that. Ooh. So you can see that light through there. When I let go of the valve, they just sort of spring shut. So you don't want to see any light through there. And that's all the reed valves are. They're just a one-way one-way valve, check valve I think they call them sometimes, depending on what part of the world you're from, for allowing the fuel and air mixture to be pressurized in the crankcase. So these can be another reason that a two-stroke's not starting. So bad outboards can actually run okay with reed valves a bit dodgy, but they can be hard to start. So if you've got a hard starting outboard, this can be a definitely be a cause. These ones look pretty good. They're sealed well. They look pretty clean. The ones I had that were bad on that other V6 Mercury had a lot of corrosion on them. Not so much like a rust, but a lot of that sort of just the kind of salt sort of deposit you get in carburetors when they've been left sitting for a long time. And then if you look in, you'll see, as I'll show you, why not, while we're here. So if you look inside, see if I can see the light for you. There we go. Then behind the reed valves, you've actually just got the crankcase, which is where the big end bearings are, the conrods you can see sort of thing, and the crankshaft in there. And that's where all that oil and fuel go. So the oil's in the fuel to lubricate that part of the motor, because there's no crankcase or no sump oil. And so you're looking into the bottom of the engine there. So thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of this video. I kind of, as I said, in my mind I think of this video as sort of a contents for this channel. I'd like to think that eventually I'm going to go into doing, if I haven't already, to do videos that show a lot more detail about various sections of this, using a timing light, cleaning a carburetor, all the things that can go wrong. But this is kind of a diagnostic video. It's about the simple checks you can do to try and pinpoint what's going wrong. A really great diagnostic principle really is sort of a process of elimination. Wherever you can figure out what the problem isn't is great. You just keep narrowing it down. And of course it depends a lot on the outboard you've got, whether it's kickstart, pull start, 4-stroke, 2-stroke, all that sort of thing. But so I apologise in some ways for the lack of detail you might have wanted from some of these sections if you found the problem you're looking for. But please have a look through the rest of the channel, because you might find a detailed video on the problem you're having. And if not, feel free to comment and request it, because I'm happy to sort of have people say what they'd like to hear. Got plenty more videos I'm planning to do. I haven't run out of ideas yet. But more than happy to have people say, listen, can you go into XYZ in detail, and we'll get one done on that as well. One I know it's been asked for a couple of times and I'm planning to do soon is sort of carburetor tuning. Just got a set of vacuum gauges for doing that. I definitely need to do it on my outboard at the moment, because it's kind of idling like a hairy goat. Really needs some work on it. So thanks again. Please subscribe if you'd like to sort of see more of these videos as they come online, and I'll catch you soon. See ya.